All right, we're back. All right, sorry, Dr. Maraglia,
That's
continue
okay.
right on.
That is okay. Um, but another thing that we also talk about, and we tend to think about our students being the ones who are doing the cyberbullying. Something else that you have to deal with, and we had issues of this in CMS. Sometimes it's your teachers.
Mm-hmm.
We have had many instances where teachers have posted things on Facebook that were completely inappropriate, saying that they teach at the most ghetto school
Mm-hmm.
or using completely inappropriate terms and racial slurs and things of that nature. Or even, uh, this is not necessarily bullying, but teachers that are posting things about drinking and partying or things like that. You can't let that go either. You've got to address those situations. And we have had teachers that lost their jobs for the things that they have posted on social media. And I know that they think it's personal, their private lives, but if they're referring to the school children, that is a very serious issue. And other things
It
that the
disrupts the
public
school
is
environment.
seeing exactly is impacting the school environment. And even though what they do on their own time is their business, again, is impacting the environment. If it's got parents coming into your building questioning the morality of your teachers, that's impacting your school environment. Children see it, they find out about it, they're talking about it. That's impacting your school environment. So
Yeah,
it's
and
not
and
just children doing these things, it's the grown-ups as well.
and that thank you for that. That's the entree into sometimes they're the ones doing the harassment and the bullying of other adults at the building, especially if they've been involved in some kind of a romantic relationship that went wrong. Now
Yes,
that happens all the time. That's a biggie. Because everybody wants their business out there nowadays. Everybody's got to be on some electronic platform with their business right out in front. Well, the problem with that is when it goes bad, then they start sniping and making bad things and post and you know that you're not going to get away from the internet nowadays. It's going to drive your day.
it
Either your
really
kids are going
is.
to be on it acting appropriately, or your teachers, one or the other, or both.
And one thing, and Dr. Lamb has got some wonderful stories, and he's had a lot of experiences. And I have to say, one of the experiences that I had, and this was later on in my career. I mean, you still are learning throughout the whole time. But one day I was at school, and the secretary came to me and said that there was an FBI agent who wanted to speak with me. I like to think of myself as a pretty law-abiding citizen, and I have never encountered knowingly an FBI agent. So I was a little nervous. I couldn't imagine why he wanted to speak with me. And that's when I learned about the app Tumblr. And we had a student who was putting stories on Tumblr about school shootings. She was making up stories, fictional stories about school shooting. And I did not realize how much policing was going on with the different law enforcement agencies, and they had picked up on this, and they traced her to her. She lived with her grandparents, and they traced her back there, and they went and paid a visit to the grandparents, and then they came to school and wanted us to be aware that this was going on. And even though that none of this had happened at school, our school was never named, these were fictional stories, we still had to be part of the investigation. We levied consequences because that's disruptive of the school day. And she had been sharing some of this work with some of our students in our building. So, that was impacting them. Um, and not only that, I got the pleasure of having to get on Tumblr and help monitor on a daily basis if there were anything else that any other stories that were showing up under her name. So that introduced me to the world of Tumblr. But, again, something you are completely unexpecting, nothing is happening in your building that you know of, and then an FBI agent shows up on your doorstep. So that was a little intimidating, I will say. Um, and very educational for me to see
Yeah.
something like that happening.
Yeah. Quick and dirty. I had the Secret Service show up because I had a student went to computer lab and sent a death threat to the First Lady of the United States of America. Yeah.
Which
From
first
our
lady?
computer
So,
lab.
oh, well, you know what? We did too, because we also had one of the detectives from CMS Police called me one day because we had a student that was doing some things in the computer lab.
Yeah.
So you just never know what is going to pop
What
up
it's going
on
to
your
be.
doorstep,
But
especially when it comes to social media.
yeah, but but the point is you can't ignore it. You can't just stick your head in the sand and it'll go away or claim it's not my business or whatever. When the Secret Service shows up and said, somebody sent help. This was during the first, when did Bill Clinton get elected the first time? 92. Shortly thereafter, his wife Hillary, before she ran for president, was hated all over the country. She was hated because she was trying to do universal health care. And so a lot of people were sending her death threats, and boy, they were busy in Charlotte at the Secret Service hub in Charlotte. And so, yeah, they showed up one day for me and traced it to our computer lab, and they found the kid. So, I mean, this stuff, it gets serious. These kids go, they, especially in this charged political environment now, kids go to the max. They don't start out here, they start out here now. And teachers do too, as we've seen recently with recent political events. Everybody's at 11 to start with now. You probably don't get that reference from time, but 10's as high as the scale goes, but everybody's going to 11 now. And a lot of this rhetoric and discourse online, it comes back to you. Um,
And something else, when we talk about searching, if you've got a situation with a student, and you need to, it's fine for you to search for a phone. If that is reasonable in scope for you to do that. But then you start getting into some murky waters about searching what is on the phone.
Yeah, and that's why you need to, we always talk about I don't care what kind of search you're doing, you need a resource officer with you. What if you find something illegal? You need to be able to hand it to them. You don't need to take it into your person. Now you're in possession of it. So let's talk about search and seizure. All right, there's two different standards. There's reasonable suspicion and probable cause. School officials only have to have reasonable suspicion, much less higher standard. But you better not search somebody without the police present because you don't know what you're going to hand it to them. Now, the police have to have probable cause. They can watch you search, but they have warrant powers. So if you can take a kid's phone, you can't search the phone, but they can get a warrant and search it. That's what happened at Huff High School, where this the AP that I had trained was, not that I had trained him, but that's how I got the story back. He called and told me, and saw kids passing around this phone, got it, and it was pictures. This guy at the high school, who was 18, by the way, was having these middle school girls next door at Bailey Road Middle School send him naked pictures, middle school girls, and he was 18, and we're able to get a warrant, and he's in prison now because he was blackmailing them to have sex with 12 and 13-year-old girls, him 18. He would entice them to send him a picture, then he'd use the picture to blackmail them. And if they wouldn't go along with the sex, he would post it on social media, their pictures. Yeah, it was really ugly, really, really ugly. But he did the right thing. He got the resource officer, took him with him. They went, they confiscated the kid's phone. He could do that. He just had to have reasonable suspicion. He turned it over to the resource officer. They got a warrant. They saw enough on it that the policeman did that he was able to get a warrant. Biggity bangity boom, and the chain of custody there. Now, don't do a strip search. I don't care what you do. Don't do a strip search. But don't search without the police present because if you find a gun, a knife, or drugs, you need to be able to hand it to them and they'll take over from there. But you do not want to take that stuff in your possession. You don't want to just go back and throw a knife in a drawer and have a drawer full of knives in your desk drawer in your office. That won't go well because now you're in possession of a weapon. You're not indemnified when you take stuff off kids. So if you're searching kids, always have your resource officer there with you. Make sure that you do that. That's to protect you. Again, we don't want to be losing our house. And so you need to have that with them. Remember, You just have to have reasonable suspicion. And so, but they can be with you as a witness, and then they can take over. Once you identify something on them they shouldn't have, now the policeman has probable cause and he can take over, or she. So that's how that piece of it works. So you got to make sure that you do that. Going back to our materials for the evening here, we've covered bullying, cyberbullying. I don't like to spend a lot of time. You folks are smart. You can you can you can look at those slideshows and do them. But right here is where I want to kind of bring a conclusion to this section. Three Bellingham school administrators were criminally cited. They lost this case, by the way. They didn't do anything wrong. They just failed to follow up and report. And they got criminally cited and they lost in criminal court. My point is this, and you can read about this. And um they didn't report when a brought a sexual assault. Um they didn't bother to follow it up. And so there the people are that ended up losing a criminal case and got criminal, not only civil punishment, civil means money. They got charged and convicted criminally for not reporting. Um, and so that's what we're talking about here. Um, Prior to that case, which is 2 years old, you could be charged civilly, which means you could lose your money, but and you know, and your livelihood, your house. But now, if you don't report and something bad happens, you can lose your freedom. You can be charged criminally, not only civilly, that's tort liability. You can now be charged criminally for not reporting things that happen at your campus or actively trying to cover them up. Or playing that game where you put them in part way in Power School or Infinite Campus, but don't hit the button for suspension level so you can take it out later. That kind of stuff. All the games that we play, putting it in Educator's Handbook rather than putting it in Power School. All those games we play, yeah, until you get caught. It's all fun and games till you get caught. And
And I
remember
would,
that it's not only civil, it's now criminal if you don't report.
and along with all the cyber issues, I would say Title IX is probably the other hot button issue for educators. Um, over the last few years, but I feel like it's still continuing where you constantly see school administrators who are being accused of not reporting sexual cases to law enforcement, not investigating, not following proper procedure. And a lot of districts, a lot of school administrators have gotten in trouble for that. And it's gotten to the point where there's a lot administrators, school staff have to take Title IX training annually, and there is a very specific process that you have to follow. You want to make sure you follow your district's process, and every district has to have a Title IX liaison. So you want to make sure you know who that person is. And I would always say, when you are dealing with something, stay in contact with that person. Let them help lead you through it. Don't just assume you know the steps. I've got the steps right here on a poster. That's great. I would still be in contact with that person and have them help you go through the process. Again, it's just like having a witness when you search. You want to do it for your protection so that someone can't come back to you and say, well, you didn't do it the right way or you didn't do it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not acting is not a response. You can't do that.
Yeah. So today was Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month at Gardner Webb. So today was faculty meeting day on campus at 3 o'clock over in the student center. The entire faculty, everybody shows up once a month, just like school teachers said. We just do it once a month. We have other meetings like departmental or college or school meetings, but we have a faculty meeting every week. But this was the big one. So guess who came today? The first one of the year, Title IX coordinator showed up today to remind everybody of their responsibility. All right, now let me explain what that means. Forever and a day until 3 years ago, yeah, 3 years ago, till 2022, from the inception of Title IX, which started in 1966. The title started in 1966. So from 1966, so that was 34 plus 21 or 22, for basically 55 years. The language in Title I was persons responsible. What that meant was is you had certain people on campuses that were designated as the person that had to, if it, that had to make the report, that the student or the person had to come to them to make the report. And so forever teachers would say, well, I'm not the person's responsible, I'm not on that list. Yeah, the student told me that, but I don't have a legal obligation to report it. In 2022, the law changed. Now it's responsible person. They just changed, they just flipped it now. But what does that mean? That means if you get a check at your school, you are required to report. If somebody makes a report to you, you are required to make that report and to follow up. If you get a check, now volunteers like parent volunteers, they don't get a check, but everybody else, I'm talking about bus driver, custodian, cook, cafeteria worker, teacher assistant, teacher, dean, facilitator, coach, principal. If you get a report, you're required to report that to your Title IX and to follow up. You are a responsible person if you get a check. At one time, at Gardner Webb, there weren't but like four persons responsible on the whole campus. Now everybody is, and we were reminded of that responsibility today by Leslie Villarose, Vice President for Student Affairs and acting Title IX coordinator, came and reminded us all today that we're all responsible people. And if there's a report of a student being harassed, bullied on sexual, gender, whatever, it doesn't matter. Or yeah, a student makes a report to you or you witness it, you have a duty to report it and to follow through on it. Again, you're not gonna get away with this notion of I just pretend I didn't see it or don't know or it's not my not that nonfeasance deal. That's against the law as well. That's part of that negligence. Is that nonfeasance, that negligence piece. Um, you've got to educate yourself, but you got to be proactive. You got to do the stuff. Now, sometimes I'll have students say, "But my district says they don't really like it. They don't like when I do this stuff." Because it's bad public relations. Nobody can give you permission to break the law because it's inconvenient or uncomfortable for them. And there's a lot of pressure that backs back down in districts that everybody's supposed to keep the lid on, handle it in-house, which means cover up. That's what handling house means, is a cover up. Now you get caught in the cover up and I find out, I'm gonna fire everybody involved because I know we're gonna go to court. And when it get to court, it's gonna be bad. And that's what happened, one of the high schools. They did the cover up. Everybody from the data manager to the principal and everybody in between had to go home because they got together and cooked it up and cooked the books. They did a conspiracy. If that comes out in court, remember, you can be charged criminally now. The only thing that saved them on that deal was they could only be hit civilly. Now they all got hit hard in their pocketbook. But you think about that, thankfully for them, that was prior to this the new criminal charges that now go with these things. All of them would have been in jail. That is correct. They would have went to real jail. Um, they'd have been out in orange jumpsuits picking up trash off the interstate on, that they'd have been in jail. I'm not making that up. So you better get it in your mind because this is the way we've always done things here, or we've always handled this in house, or we just send them home for therapy. None of that stuff is legal. And when you get caught, nobody can give you permission to break the law, and it will not go well for you. All right, so we've covered our discipline, our due process, our cyberbullying, the one that's going to be the hardest, the most prevalent, the most relevant for today. We've covered all those things. Look at those materials that I've got in the shelf for you. All right, since Courtney's out in front, leading the way on the OMA here, I want to talk. I've got 4 minutes, and that's just enough time to talk about the skip. That is our next evidence, and so I will cover it more in depth a little bit later, but I just want to introduce it tonight. So let me share my screen. I've got it pulled up. Let me close some of this stuff. All right, so let me move this out of the way. And here we go. This one is straightforward. You form a team, do a needs assessment and the gaps of communication between the internal and external community. Now, it needs to say when you're doing this one, it needs to say this needs assessments for gaps. Let me make we're not doing a needs assessment on gaps in learning or math scores. This is gaps in communication between the school and parents. Everybody understands that. You know, that's where this one goes wrong. Um, and so what you need to do is look at the parent section of the teacher working condition survey or the parent survey for South Carolina and look at the communication questions. That's all you have to do is just look at that. You don't have to send a survey. You just need to look at the survey data that your district has for your school on parents and look at the communications. So quickly, I want to show you that, and then you can see the second one here. You can use um, you need to look at the leadership section of that same TWC or survey in South Carolina. You need to look at that and assess the leadership section on it. So we're looking at the parent section of the TWC on this one. We're looking at the leadership section on this one. Let's make sure that we know what we're talking about here. So I'm going to quickly Google NC Teacher Working Conditions Survey. When we pull it up, um, let me do it
Oh,
quickly.
that's an old one.
And so we'll look at Asheville City. We'll look at Jones Elementary School. All right. This is the one I want right here. School leadership. This is for task one prompt B, where it says again, where it says right prompt two, you'll look at the TWC leadership. This is the one I'm talking about right here. This is the one that I am, if I can get all this stuff out of the way, it keeps crawling in front of me here. This is the one I want for prompt two under task one. And then for the first one where you're doing a needs assessment on communication, community support and involvement right here. This school encourages parent and guardian involvement. This is what we're talking about right here. Teachers provide parent guardians with useful information. See, this is about communication. This is gaps in communication right here. Know what's going on in school. Support teachers contributing to success with students. That just those 5 questions right there. That's all you have to assess where your school is. Okay? That's your needs assessment right there. Don't and again, assess doing the second assessment, the second part of the second prompt, you use school leadership. So it couldn't be any easier. This one again is not long. So if you get started the right way, this one goes really, really easily. You get that out of the way. Let me go back here. Again, skip task and prompt, skip example, and then the graphic organizer that you use where you put together where your resources and the activities. And right here, make sure you look at all of these. But understand The assessments, the data for these assessments come out of the TWC in North Carolina in that parent survey and teacher survey in South Carolina. Obviously, the school leadership comes from the teacher survey, the communication comes from the parent survey in South Carolina. You don't have to go out and send a survey or gather any. This is, can you use existing data to make decisions? That's what this one is. It's just that quick and it's just that easy. This one shouldn't take but about a week. I mean, seriously, this one is easy. Easy peasy. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't go out and start trying to survey people and do all of that. You've already done that. You've shown how we build our skills each semester. You showed that you know how to do peer reviews. I'm done with that. Now we're focusing on collaborating to create a product this semester. A case study, that's a bigger deal. That's more advanced level stuff. Stuff that we've already done. We're moving on to more stuff. 4 times this semester, you've got to collaborate to make a product where you're doing a presentation. Guess what? When you get into school business for real, when you get into upper levels of leadership, that's what you do all the time. We need to start developing that skill set. Things that we've already done, I'm not saying forget them, but if you've already done them, we're not doing them again. We're moving on to something higher level all the time. We're scaffolding up to higher levels. So pretty easy. The skip's pretty easy, and again, Courtney's out in front on that. Courtney, make sure that you submit your comprehensive final with all 4 tasks, and you've already got it. Put it in the Dropbox for the final for all 4 tasks, and the Dropbox for turn it in for all 4 tasks. Uh,
Okay.
and then when I see those, we'll go straight to task stream, and you'll be done, and you can move on to the skip. All right,
Okay.
next week we got case study. I can't wait. I covered it last week. We should be good. You should know what you should be. You should all be experts on school funding and the inequities that we have, but because of the Leandro case, and I'm ready to hear it. What you think about the superintendent's plan next week? All right, Doctor Maraglia, you close us out this evening, and thank you for joining us.
Well, and thank you for letting me be a few minutes late. I appreciate that. But it was good to see everybody. I was glad to be back this week and um had some really good topics, especially tonight, and just really relevant to what you're going to have in your future. And so it's just good to see you tonight, and I cannot wait for case studies.
Yep, we love that. We hope y'all do too. It's good to see you all tonight. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. Everybody
Good
have a good night.
night.
Good night.